and we'll have John join us here in a bit. Hello, Chris. It's Chris here. Chris 1 to Chris 2. No, you're Chris 1. I'll be Chris 2. I see Janice and Ann are here. And let's see here. You should have an invite in the app when you join. In notifications. For those who don't know my buddy, John Jackson. If you're on Twitter, you might see him a bit, but he's around, and we need some theme music, get us in the mood for our Monday night, because John is all this. All of this is all like scripta, but just gotta have some mood, right? Mood music. When I go walking in the morning to get going, I kind of like how, as I'm leaving the elevator, leaving the stairwell, I don't know what it is with the timing. As soon as I turn out, the music shifts so perfectly, you would think it was music, specifically theme music for my day. Don't understand. But it is what it is. So we have a Monday with, had an air raid just a little while ago. It has cleared up a bit. There were some drones in the area go around TET 6, our power facility north of us. They don't hunt TET 5 as much because TET 5 was hit so much, it pretty much is mostly inoperative. We have had electricity all day. God bless our wonderful DTEK people. This is Chris Sampson live from Kiev, if you don't know that already. I broadcast from pretty much the war, and I've lived here since January 2022, 1,421 days of full-scale war. No break, no vacations, no time off. There's always something to do. Very little rest today. A lot of activity. I finished up a couple of articles to get up there. One of them, as I go around to see what's in the chat space, if they told you Iraq had weapons, they were wrong. Now, let's look at the new enemy. Let's look at what Iran actually has. And I did this because, one, living here, we have Shahid attacks all the time. Russia has started making those, over a year ago. I don't know how much material they get from Iran. Essentially, the Shahid drones were Iranian make, but there are plants that you will even hear in the news that are hit by Ukrainian forces in Russia. And the load in from that is very important because people are asking, like, what will change in Ukraine because of the attacks on Iraq? Well, some things will obviously change because the way in which Russia was using its power, or its alliances as part of its power, distribution. It's not only using the Shahids, it uses their hackers, it uses some rocket technology. But Russia mostly isn't best boosted by Iran. Both Iran and Russia are best boosted by China. So I have a few friends who are better experts in that than me, and we will be bringing them on. Hello, Patty, and hello, Pamela. Thanks for joining. Um, the um, the way in which China is currently helping in Iran is pretty much, I guess, propaganda power, soft power. They're not really having to do a lot more than that at this point. They will, probably, if I know anything about how China operates, it will be a waiting game where they let this play out. And, they're very patient, long-term strategists in a way. And it's not to idealize them. It's just to say I understand the difference between the bull and the China shop Russians, the gnat on the wall Chinese, and the activity of the Iranians. I said this in broadcast last night, which was a surprising 2 hours improvisation off the top of my head of what's going on in the news. A little bit based on the article I put out yesterday called "The Anti-War Illusion: How Forever War Rhetoric Collapsed." Hold on, what's the end of this? It always does ... collapsed in real time. Largely inspired by all the posts that we know were quickly recycled of not going to war, not going to war. We don't do wars. We're tired of forever wars. Remember all that rhetoric? I do. Mixed with a new version of it, which is that the statement that some of them would use. Hold on, I'm trying to get some browsers so I can see your texting, so I can read you better than on the phone. I don't like on the phone. If you haven't tried this, you can't really see. You can't see the chatter as much once it scrolls up, but I can see it. Paraphrasing: don't stop your enemies when they are making mistakes. Exactly. And there's a few things that I see in what's happened in the last couple of days that I think are important. Is that the rhetoric about war, the not getting into forever wars has been completely shut down, but the tough guy talk about we're the mightiest army, we will do whatever we want, we're not done yet, you wait, you'll see. Why has all that been held back against Russia? The convenient care for innocence, when they don't care about innocent people, they like to bomb brown people. They like to bomb Muslims. They like to bomb brown people. They play into the same hatred rhetoric that they've always done. So I'm not really expecting to see much different than that. When cornered, they deflect. There are some opportunists that kind of play all sides at the same time, and I expect that will stay the same. If there's anything you see in the news, if you'd like to drop it down in the chat, I will definitely try to see if we can make sure that that's available for us to chime in on. One thing that I know we're going to talk about tonight is that John went to one of the distributors of Ubiquiti parts, which is the technology company that is providing the Wi-Fi transmissions that were found in the Shahid drones, and I wrote an article about it on this platform based on some good Ukrainian OSINT stuff, Inform Napalm and others that are paying attention to these, and also paying attention to the reactions in the Russian Milsec crowd when the Starlink and other technologies were cut off. What were they going to run back to? So we look forward to seeing that. There's a few things that are also interesting about how Zelensky is offering the defense technology necessary and the training necessary to deal with drone warfare. I've asked a friend, one of the guys on our team, if he would like to come in the next few days or maybe next week and talk about what we think of needs to be learned by the Americans, by the countries in the Middle East, based on a very sophisticated in-country training here on a regular basis. And the analogy I use is you're only so good in your forms in Kung Fu as the first time the punches start flying in the street. Once the punches start flying in the street, pretty much it's on, and you better hope that your training was sufficient. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. It is beginning to be springtime. I'm actually already warm in this sweaty. This hoodie that's too for me. Like, it was cold outside earlier. Now I'm sitting in this thing inside, and it's toasty. And I'm not the toasty type. I like a little bit of the winter, but I'm kind of worn out on the winter at this point, like everyone else. Mainly not even just for myself. the stabilization point tents that I featured in some segments, both on Facebook to my friends, and then later when I put some material on this platform, they're already being removed because that level of vulnerability for the elders is over. We're going to be steadily above the freezing mark, and for here, there's a lot of improvement in the support system and the buildings themselves. We've had power all day. I don't remember a single moment when we had a blackout on this day, which is kind of surprising. And I think that it'll stay that way for some time. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to actually come right back. I'm just going to change out of this hoodie thing because it is too warm, and we'll wait for John. And I can't deal with the heat. I don't like being all sweaty and hot and this sweaty. So give me one moment. There we go. Much better. Much happier. Thank you for your patience. Yay! All good, all good, all good. Much better. Much better. The return of Tilki Futbolka, my nickname. Only t-shirt. And I think that's so much better. Much, much more comfy. I'm easily, like, when it comes to 0 degrees, that's how I got the nickname, was going out at 0 degrees to go to the cafe next door at my old apartment for 3 years, and saying that the grandmas here, the babusi, they will always ask you if you're cold. No. Let's see. Okay, he'll be here in just a second. Oh, good. Very good, very good. Um, and so I would go out in a t-shirt to get to the cafe. Now, to be honest with you, if I have to be in a situation where I'm out for quite an extended period of time, not so much. I'm at that point, I'm a little more ready to kind of negotiate and at least have a sweater or something that's thinner. But more than that, especially because I'm very active, I try to get across. Then I try to make sure I'm getting from A to B. First time chat on Substack. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I think that this platform is better. And I did find that Michael Flynn is on this platform. Yeah, he's already getting some good followers. One of the missions we'll have right here is that we're now at 617 subscribers, and let's keep pushing that number up. You know, if you find the posts that you see, share them, tell your friends. We do live broadcasting from Ukraine, specifically a lot of time from Kiev, but I'll be going out east next week, it looks like. So we'll see, and I report from other areas. But traders like Mark Flynn are taking to this platform, and he's advertising it to a Telegram crowd that has 170,000 followers. So he's in the rising news category. In fact, I'll push the rising news link here to see where he's at. I think he was number 4, right? Is that correct? Bestsellers in news, number 5. So, and Parnas, really American, who I don't know that is. Andrew Weissman, we remember him. And then Katie Couric, Michael Flynn, Israel Real Time, Roca News, John Ellis. And then I say Glenn Kirshner, Yashar Ali, some of these different folks. John Fugel sang in there. And if you go a little further down into number 27, that's us. We're now up to number 27 in Rising News, 617 subscribers. We have accumulated out of that. One moment. Where's the... There we go. The subscriber numbers are... Hold on. Where is that silly dashboard? There we are. Out of 617, there are 42 paid subscribers. Now, why do I bring that up? Because this is a truism for a lot of accounts. The big accounts, there are plenty of them that are, they show the numbers, but a certain amount are paying in. And we understand everyone has economic realities, so we appreciate that. But where possible, if people can throw in $5 as a base subscription to, especially the most trafficked accounts, like I added $6. He doesn't have a $5 rate, but $6 to Glenn Kirshner, because I think he's doing a great job over there. He's on fire trying to do a great job. Michael Fanone, Capitol Police Officer. And if we continue with it, we'll see when Sergeant Gunnell is using the platform more. He comes on a little bit, but there's a GoFundMe account. In fact, I will try to see if I can find that link and make sure our friends have that for everybody so that we stay in touch with his needs. And I want to also say I really enjoyed being on Rick the Ukrainian's live stream yesterday with our brother Sean Penner. Sean will be back on Friday, and we will do our weekly report. And then Friday night, I have my friend Mark Zaid, one of our finest attorneys in the country, a legal powerhouse all unto himself, will join us at this time on Friday night. And that will be a big honor because I think he's super important to so many topics in law. Whistleblowers is the case, type that he's most known for. But for all of you who have asked about the sonic attacks in Havana, and how, whether or not the Russians were involved or not, I think that, see, I know many of those names, Chris, and yes, thank you for joining us. Yeah, yesterday to see Rick the Ukrainian live stream, have me in it all. I mean, Sean being there makes sense. Me in there, the reason why it kind of, I guess, makes sense is that I see Rick more than I see just about anybody when I go to the rallies here. Yarek is always out there doing the live streams, and this is why I didn't. I did a few live streams last year for the Defender rallies, the Defender Project, which the Defender Project keeps going, but trying to do it with a second stream when we have a substantial stream at that. I would rather direct the people over to his stream, cooperate, and use a single source where we already have the audience paying attention. So it was great to see him on there. And then talking to Ziza, we're going to be reporting on Crimea. And there will be hopefully a lot of, upcoming segments that we're building in order to give better supply of information to you, but also get responses back from you about what do you learn about Crimea, what do you learn about the Crimean people, what is, like, even here, I hear a lot of information that mentions Crimea, but I only get to see so many of those mentions or panels with actual Crimean members. So having Aziza on yesterday was very important. And joining us from his awesome studio that does awesome broadcasting all the time is my good buddy John. Welcome. How are things?
Good, man. Sorry about the little technical glitch I had, but we're ready to rock and roll now.
Right? Well, that's because I had to flip you from horizontal to vertical.
That's what she said.
And check out that wall. I see that wall all the time in your live broadcasts. I recognize some of the things that are on that wall behind you. Menace, as we see in some of the land when I travel around the east and the south. But
Yeah, man.
so
The mines, for the minefield warning, very ubiquitous.
that's right.
And then behind my shoulder over here is actually, it's interesting. There's an artist who does a lot of work for charity work for Ukraine. Those are
Mm.
actually a collection of stamps um, taken from various Ukrainian stamps over like the past 100 years,
Wow.
made into a mosaic of a soldier. It's a print, but that's where she made it from. Is actually, so there's like 150 years of Ukrainian stamps that make up that soldier.
Yeah. Wow. And I see you've got Baby Yoda on the wall. You
Oh
got
yeah,
to show you have Grogu.
yeah, Grogu, man. He's I'm waiting for the new one to come out. But you know him and Mandalorian. It's like the whole good versus evil, and they're actually. If you
Yeah.
see the latest trailer that just came out, he was talking about
Mm.
the Empire, and he's like, he says something about like war criminals, and we'll punch everyone in their tickets. And it just made me reminded me of
Ah.
Russia and Ukraine. So
Well, it does actually, and it's the warrior ethos that's especially with Mandalorian, the warrior
yeah, the
ethos
ethics.
that goes on there and the ethics are a big deal of that. So, for those of my friends here who might not know you, or even some of them might recognize you from being on the Twitter live streams, would you mind telling our good friends like some of the fun stuff you did here, some of the great work you were doing here? I say fun, with bunny ears in the
Yeah,
face because work is work. Tell
yeah.
us what you did here in Ukraine.
So I was a trial lawyer before this time. Before I went to Ukraine, before I came out there, I was actually doing a lot of pro bono work for various people, journalists, media organizations, others, volunteers. And I don't know, man. Like you see what's happening. You saw the war crimes and just like good versus evil and overwhelming compulsion to come out there. So I did. No prior military experience before I came out, but I did have a lot of firearms experience, if you will. And so came out very very early 2023. Basically joined up with the 130th TDF
Oh, okay.
in an infantry quick reaction force unit, but we had a special foreigner unit within that underneath the TDF because we wanted more flexibility. Worked with some great guys, Australia, Chile, France. Got some great training from NATO standard level infantry training, and did a lot of good work around Izium, Kramatorsk, Chasiv area.
Okay.
So I was out there. Man, it was kind of all over. I was also in Kherson
Mhm.
when the dam was blown. Was there
Mm,
standing next to the Grand Rabbi of all of Ukraine when so we almost both got hit. Was
mm.
standing on the shore and went back, in a 152 landed right where I was standing. The day Zelensky went down there, it was super hot as far
Okay.
as
I
spicy
know
as
when
far
that
as
happens. Right. Right. Right.
yeah. And so, and then it was there early 2024. Came back for surgery here on my leg and foot, and then been out, probably at least every 90 days or so, several times. Just, I'm still supporting my units, my guys, and do a ton of work. Obviously with advocacy stuff here,
Mhm.
Washington, DC, put on a lot of events. Just got back from Washington on one of those. So
Oh,
working with,
yeah. Thank you for mentioning because I had that in my list of things to go. Keep going.
yeah. So like,
You're gonna talk about
I still,
something. Yeah.
I spend pretty much full time working on Ukraine stuff. Supporting units, supporting advocacy. Obviously, we've got sort of the dual track here with the crazy situation with Donald Trump and sort of the world in a place of turmoil, but a turmoil that is also a great opportunity to build something better. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on. So we're really staying busy and continuing to support Ukraine. And this is going to be the year of victory, I believe, when things turn around. So I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Let me ask you this. What do you think stood out to you that you didn't know when you got here? What is your most significant impression to walk away with after getting here? That something that literally you couldn't have known until you got here.
Oh, I mean, I think there's some really like big emotional, weighty, supernatural feeling kind of stuff, and then there's like kind of the everyday mundane. Let me take the first one first. Obviously, I felt like throughout my life, I uh, had a lot of sort of career success and things like that, but always felt sort of empty. Late at night, 3 a.m., sunlight coming through the blinds, kind of feel like, man, I got some kind of itch. I got
Yeah.
some kind of whisper from the darkness. There's something more I should be doing out there, and I didn't know what that was until this war started. And then I come in, I'm crossing the border, and I'm on the train to Poland. I'm sorry, from Poland, and I cross over into Ukraine, and the sunlight is rising up. It's like I got a video. It's like 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning, and everybody's asleep. And when
Mm.
people are asleep, that's when people look the most alike. The old man and the young girl, they all have the same expression of peace on their face, right? And I just felt this moment where, you're on the train and you see like um the doorway at the end is there's kind of light pouring through, a little pinch of sunlight coming, kind of breaking over into the train window. And I just felt this overwhelming emotion, like I'm responsible for these people. They're relying on me. And like that's never changed. But I think that emotion that came upon me with that, it was and how I felt that ever since. I think that was like the biggest sort of like heavy, huge thing that stuck with my soul. As far as everything else, man, like um, I think how much there's a lot of characteristics that are very much like America, and
Hmm.
but also some things that I think are better. With the depth of the history, the resilience, the love for freedom, the fact they don't take things for granted, and man, just like the food, the culture,
The f- and
everything.
and
Like
and the fact that they don't stop feeding you.
that's right, that's right. And an experience that we don't have in America. Like we don't really have like mass graves. There may be one or
Sure.
some areas where there was some individual war crimes against Native Americans and so forth, but it's not like outside of Kiev where there's a mass grave with 270,000 people, right? It's
Right.
not like in Izium where there's just in the past couple of years there was hundreds of women and children in that, and I
Yep.
think to be out east and to see a full moon and to know that all the wars and the fights that have happened here and the struggles across the 1500, 1600 years of Ukrainian history for their identity and who they are. I don't know. For me, I don't know how many people are. I can definitely feel that. And, um, it's like very humid. And that reminds me where I grew up in Atlanta. It's just, there's so much emotion and vibration and soul coming through that permeates everything in there. And obviously I think it's related to the war, but you can definitely feel it. You just kind of open your mind a little bit.
Yeah, some of the viewers have been in here before. Maybe some who are just joining now did know this, but the others know I covered it last week. I filmed in a Zoom in the first 2 weeks after the liberation of Kharkiv region. So we were there 26th through the 29th, dropping off aid, and it's quite a powerful memory to walk through the forest area there on that side, the north side of Izum, and that the investigation teams were still going through exhuming victims that had been buried there, and the fact that the Russians had forced the Ukrainians to bury their people there after leaving them to die in parts of the city. Tell me a little bit about when you began joining in with the forces themselves. How the part we can talk about, some parts we won't. To the audience, just be very aware. Both of us are very OPSEC oriented, so there will be things that we probably won't share easily, even if things have changed. But um, when you got in that position where you were going to join those forces, what were some of the difficulties for you, or some kind of, especially being in a foreign country? I assume you didn't speak Ukrainian, and I
Right.
don't know if you spoke any Russian, but you have to traverse those things. How difficult was that for you, or the on ramping?
You know, um, it's interesting because you go from like a sort of like a corporate white collar life to being in Kramatorsk with no air conditioning,
Right.
like in July. Um, but like
Good point.
yeah, you can become very, I mean, you got Google Translate, all that, but you can be very adept at like using your hands to describe things, like this,
Hmm.
1, 2, whatever. And I think like, um, I was with good people and I'm fortunate for that. I had people who would support me, like, and if I had an issue, I could call other people that had been in the military, been there since the beginning. And, I think that, it's the first time I shared a bed with another guy, okay, and with another male. And actually one I'm not going to tell you who it is. It's a former the 82nd Airborne, great guy, like great soldier. He'd done multiple tours in Afghanistan. But one night he's like, he rolled over and like, I never had this before. He's like, there's a guy, somebody scratching my back, and I'm like, I'm like, hey, and I was like, and they're like, what do you? Hey, why are you scratching my back? And it's just kind of like I knew it. And he was like, "No, god damn it," and he's like, he didn't mean to scratch my back. He was having a dream, and he's like scratching his girlfriend's back or his daughter's back or something. He doesn't remember what it was, and it always became a joke. So um, a lot of great moments. I think that the language stuff was never that surprisingly, at least for me, like a really big issue, and just kind of, but you have to plan ahead. I think that was,
Sure.
and that's what I learned. Like everything is about planning ahead and not just waiting until the moment, because that's when it becomes like it snowballs, it becomes more difficult to deal with the language and the barrier. But like culture wise, man, like Christmas time in Kiev, they're playing Bing Crosby in English in the mall, you know, um, and I think that people were like incredibly, and just like in general, people were like polite, incredibly supportive. Um, despite what they're dealing with, it's not like people are rude. I promise you, you're going to deal with more people being a pain in the ass at a Starbucks in Los Angeles than you are going to be in fucking Izium or somewhere like that.
Right.
So I don't, and I also, I had good people before. If I didn't come out here just like totally like naked as far as people to talk to or experience.
Sure.
So I'm very fortunate for that. Now you ask these questions, it makes me think back on like how much time that saved me, how much heartburn
Sure.
or headache that saved me. Um, but yeah, no, I was very fortunate. I guess there's like a whole nother reason to give those people credit and thanks for what they did.
When we talk about Ukraine to Americans, one of the things I try to do is take the what I consider to be the human side that doesn't translate to the headlines. There are areas that we interact with that if you turn on CNN, BBC, or the print, none of these aspects get through. And you mentioned one of them, like the calmness and the way in which Ukrainians during such despair and shock of the day go on about life ridiculously calm. Um, is there anything you think that Americans can learn from that as this Trump era gets more hostile and the war
Yeah,
in
I think
Iran?
yeah, the thing I would say is that like you have no idea the true limit of human endurance, emotional, physical, and otherwise, until like what I didn't know is that Ukraine, like there's and a lot of people don't realize this, and it's definitely something that's a problem with our education system. It's not taught enough in school. Is between 10 and 13 million Ukrainians were killed by the Russians in the past century, and
Right.
to know that like I've gotten pictures from Ukrainian, my Ukrainian friends of like their grandparents, sort of 30, 40 children in a black and white picture, and they're like, yeah, 3 out of this 40 survived the Holodomor,
Mm,
and um, you see people like uh like I mean Dubai is a terrible example, but like people who are not used to being bombed or not used to hearing explosions, and I'm like, and I'm like, welcome to the party, pal. That meme from Lethal Weapon, because what Ukrainians go through and the unity they have, and it brings out the best in them. I think Americans really need to, first of all, understand what's important in life and what's important in the world, but also there's so much depth of endurance, so much depth of ability to withstand things that are unexpected, things you can't control,
exactly.
than you could possibly imagine. And so, really, the number one tool, the number one power, it's interesting. People in America that are standing up against Trump and his totalitarianism and his anti-democratic ways and the state surveillance machine and all that. Um, the number one thing that the number one power that they have is only the power that you give them. And if
Mm,
you can hold fast and understand, you may arrest me. Um, I may even be hurt. I may even be thrown in jail, whatever it is. But if I don't give that to you, if I don't show fear and I
mhm.
maintain my resistance level inside, then I'm in control of how I'm seen and and how I feel and my focus on making sure that we don't give in to this person. So I think that's like the main thing is how much power you have and how much how much you're in control of your ability to resist.
And you mentioned how Ukrainians deal with this. Like, I pointed out that on the 22nd of February, a few days ago, is the 12-year mark since Yanukovych was summarily dismissed, and he wound up, flying out of here to Moscow. And then last summer, when Zelensky made the decision, or Zelensky and members of Rada made a decision to roll back some of the powers of NABU and SAPU, the anti-corruption organizations, I was in Mykolaiv, finally. It took a while to get my timing back down there. And a protest breaks out. And within 7 days, it was reversed.
Right.
And so think about how fast none of that would happen in America. Nothing happens fast anymore in American politics,
Well,
except for those things that are
that's
unchecked,
key
right?
because I mean that is so key because, and this kind of will go into some stuff about the EU.
Yep.
You have people in the United States, which you have oligarchs like Elon Musk. You have
Yep.
the people who are involved in artificial intelligence, and they're against any regulation of social media, even just normal age limits. They're against any regulation of artificial intelligence. I mean, these are the most pervasive consumer products in human history, and they want not only no regulation, but to give them immunity under the Communications Decency Act for social media, and then
Mhm.
also Trump has issued an executive order to try to cock block in the states from having any regulations of this stuff, which is probably illegal. And you see, and then they always criticize the EU anytime they try to do something basic, like, hey, put
Mhm.
watermarks on things that are on photographs that are artificial intelligence. I
Right, right.
mean, and when I look at this, I'm like, hold up, okay, look how, and then of course the MAGA cults will follow along with that, not realizing the whole time they're being exploited, just being led along. And the EU and Ukraine, I mean, these are the most functional democracies on the planet in human history. All right. The EU passes a balanced budget every single year. When's the
Right,
last time we passed a balanced budget? It's been like 30 years,
right.
their satisfaction rate is like 60, 65%, and in every quality of life metric, whether it's the cost of healthcare, whether it's the lack of medical bankruptcies, whether it's life expectancy, on and on and on. Um, they're superior. And you look at the responsiveness. I mean, Ukraine is the highest level of order of democracy. EU's good. Ukraine's even better. When's the last time something happened that quickly ever in American
Yeah.
history?
Yeah,
And
within
and so
7 days
responsive.
it was reversed, and young and middle-aged people. I didn't see old people there in the photos, but young and middle-aged people went right to the street at the president's office and said, "No, you won't." And
Yeah,
within
and the other thing too is
yeah.
in the bravery in the media. Like, we have a White House press corps
Oh
that is
yes, yes, yes,
total
yes.
it's totally service, totally servile. They're afraid of Caroline Levitt being mean to them. And it's like, look, okay, bravery? You want to talk about bravery? You want to talk about, oh, you're scared about getting fired? There's a mother in a trench somewhere who didn't even think twice about fighting. Okay.
Right.
I taught a lot of people, basic
Good point.
firearm skills and handling in the Territorial Defense Force. I could still see their eyes. These are people, I taught people who've never touched a rifle in their life how to actually be in the most intense combat since World War II. And there was never even a question. They were going to go and they were going to do it. And you see people in America like law firms that pay these ridiculous bribes to Trump based upon a totally bogus and illegal executive order. You see
Right, right,
CBS, you see ABC, you see all these institutions of government, institutions of, it was supposedly the First Amendment and journalism. Uh,
right.
and a law firm that won't fight, just totally bend over, pay millions, and um, the bravery and fighting for actual democracy that is like unquestioned and within the blood and bone marrow of the Ukrainian soul compared to America, it is
Right.
the best versus the worst, strongest versus the
Yeah, and I
weakest.
get I get questions about, for instance, some Twitter hosts, Spaces hosts have asked me this question. Some people who go to our conversations over there. Chris, is it me or are some of these press groups there, like Ukrainska Pravda is the one that comes up a lot, just antagonistic to the Zelensky administration? I mean, is it me or is there like an axe to grind? Is it me and they sense something, and it took me a while to figure out how to answer the question. Of one, I knew that journalists within those organizations had been killed in the 2000s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, and that there was a sacrifice in modern times to really hold truth to power. And the purpose of the fourth estate is to hold truth to power, much like the power of the government is designed to hold truth to corporatocracy, or the the owner class. That is your last chance as a regular civilian to hold, the Elon Musks and the, what's his name, Cook from Apple, Ted Cook,
Tim Cook, yeah.
Tim Cook. Yeah, I should know that. But I mean, how do you hold them to account if you gut the government? And yet here, when you see Ukrainska Pravda at a Zelensky press conference, Mr. President, yeah, is there too much favoritism in your administration, or there's another one, a lady in another outlet, she's antagonistic as well, but it's required, and not because someone like Zelensky is necessarily up to no good. It's just that it's required within the set of parameters here that was earned the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's probably journalists that died, that been in captivity, that have fought back, and that's like the true essence of journalism, and also like the foreign journalists who come here, the wartime journalists, like the people who, being one of somebody who's been out there close on, close where you're under fire and stuff. Um, it is like unquestioned that the risk will be taken, and like the thought of like, oh well, Caroline Levitt's gonna be mean to me. Okay, whatever. Give me a fucking break, because that's all you got.
Right.
And so, and like it would be better. I mean, like journalists in Ukraine, people like yourself would say, like, I'd rather just hang up my cleats. I will quit this job if I'm ever in a position where I'm not going to ask the right and tough question. Because so that's such a big difference. And yeah, and they would never do that. It's like, and it's an obligation. It'd be a disrespect to the Constitution and the people, and your obligation to be there.
Right.
So, I mean, like this is the ultimate opportunity, the greatest opportunity Ukrainians have to be finally free after everything they've been through over time.
Correct.
And it is the way that is achieved is everybody does the best they can do at their individual task. The soldier is going to do the best he can in his individual task. The journalist is going to retain fidelity to to their obligation to ask the tough question, to chase down the truth, to give the full story, and to never flinch from any kind of contact. So,
That's right.
and so it's a universal responsibility that flows through everyone in Ukraine.
I'm going to talk about one more thing that I know happened here that with you, and then I want to pivot to what you did with it going back to America. When we finally got a chance to meet, and one of our dear friends, Ron Carter, was with us. Um, we had an event there. I want to say it was, well, I know it was a Defender rally. I just don't think it was a Sunday Defender rally. There may have been a different, like Marine Day or something. But you came out at that time, and we did walk around and greet and show our solidarity in person to the folks there. How did that feel to you?
It felt straight, like very familiar, like the
Mhm.
place I was supposed to be. It's weird that you don't like. You think life is strange in how it evolves, and you don't really recognize uh, how you were meant for a place, time to really have the sunlight break through the clouds until decades into your existence on this earth. That's definitely what I mean. That's what it felt like, and I mainly and like so many times like that, relieved.
Mhm.
I'm so glad I'm here. I can't imagine if I'd like almost feeling bad, like if I had missed this. Holy shit, how would I feel? I'm glad I didn't miss
Right.
this. That's really what I thought.
I want to ask all of our viewers, thank you. First off, thank you for being here, everyone. I'm watching your comments and your texts on the side. So if you have some thoughts, some things you're not hearing us address that you think we should, put them in the comment area. I can read it. And also boot out the information that we're live. So if you're on Twitter, just repost what you see out there. And if you're on here, share it with your friends. When you went back, one of the things that I want to start with is that you went to Capitol Hill, and there were some activities of the Orthodox Church that were affecting Congress. Share with our viewers, if you don't mind, a little bit about what you saw and why that got your attention. And
So
what did you find? Tell us, walk us through that.
yeah, so and I'm on Substack. I'm on like basically so TikTok, Twitter, Substack, YouTube, the same username at His Goes Cobra. And so there's a Substack article that lays this out. But well, the reason I was in this is like 2 months ago. I'm on Capitol Hill with because Zarina Zarisky, who's the producer of the Human Safari documentary. was presenting that, and there's some legislative stuff, and I wanted to come out and show my solidarity and support for her in that presentation. So we showed that documentary and had a great panel discussion. It was good to see her, and also just all the different senators and politicians that came out to support that. And so I'm walking around with Katerina Lisanova, who's formerly a Voice of America, before he got Kerry Laked. And I'm going to Joe Wilson's office, Don Bacon. He's just kind of showing me around Capitol Hill. And I'm like, and she kind of stops and looks, and I notice there's priests, but they're Orthodox. They're Russian. She's like, they're Russian Orthodox. I can hear them speaking Russian. And they're all over the place. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, so this is totally random. We cross the street, and I can hear Katerina says something to him in Ukrainian or Russian, and they say something back, and I was like, what are they doing here? And then I see like Anna Paulina Luna with a Russian Orthodox, priest and a bunch of others, and I kind of stop and listen for a second, and they're claiming that Anna Paulina Luna is claiming it was a straight up Russian asset, and no doubt, no question. She's like the Where's Waldo. She's like the Where's Waldo of Russian assets. Pro-Russian Eastern European politician. She's always with them.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, and so, and I'm like pretending she's there, pretending to care about the religious liberty of Ukrainians, saying that, we're here today because Zelensky and Ukraine are discriminating against Ukrainians' religious liberty. I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, there's no way. I just knew just by her being involved in it. I had a bad feeling, but by the fact that she's involved in it, there's definitely something anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian going on here. So when I was digging into it, so I get back, I'm kind of looking into it, and it's the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, ROCOR, ROCOR, that is kind of putting on this lobbying effort. And then there's this girl, Catherine Whiteford, who's also kind of the head lobbyist. And I noticed all this stuff in my Twitter feed from like the Union of Orthodox Journalists, America. And I'm like, why is all this Orthodox stuff coming up on my feed? And like, I just know, information, when there's like a disinformation campaign that rises up on social media, especially if you have any experience with Ukraine, Russia, and the war. And so I start looking into it, and this Catherine Whiteford girl is claiming, she's a member of the society, this weird organization, Society of St. John of San Francisco or something. And then she keeps getting reposted by this other account, the Union of Orthodox Journalists America. I dig into that, and she's claiming that Law 3894, which is a religiously neutral law passed by Ukraine, and all it says is, if you are a religious organization, a foreign one, that's fine. You just cannot have your management in Russia. Your management needs to come to be in Ukraine. And obviously the reason is simple. When someone is attacked you and your adversary is controlling an organization in your country, that's a massive security risk. Guess what? It's identical to the logic of the TikTok ban. We said the TikTok ban needed to be passed, and it was uniformly upheld by the Supreme Court. Unanimously, because if China has a social media app that's picking up data, even in peacetime, that's a security risk. Ukraine also has a law like this for businesses, saying if you're a business, and we know that there's no separation in a dictatorship like you have in Russia between private business, religious organizations, and the government. The government controls all of them. Putin controls all of them. So she's coming, but she's going around and lying, just blatantly lying, saying she clearly didn't read the statute or didn't, just wanted to lie. And she's saying this law is only going after the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and they're punishing people criminally and blah, 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 all of which is false. Religiously neutral. It applied to Islam and Catholicism just the same if the situation was the identical circumstances. Right. And on top of that, there's no criminal penalty. So why is she lying about this, that, and the other? And then I look, and I'm just kind of looking into her, and I start to learn about, holy shit, her dad is a priest at a Russian Orthodox church outside Russia in Texas. And I'm like, what is this outside Russia part? And they're like, well, our administration, who we hire and fire, is not controlled by, Patriarch Kirill, who literally says, he's like the former Ayatollah, that the war in Ukraine, the genocidal invasion of Ukraine, the raping and killing of children and women is a justified holy war, okay? And they're like, well, we're not connected to that. And I'm like, they say they don't have administrative control. They can't control who we hire and fire, but they have canonical control. And most people don't look through that. They don't, like, I'm like, what does this mean? I research it. It means that that guy in Russia, in Moscow, who's with Putin all the time, who says that you should go rape and kill, Russians should go do that to Ukrainians, has religious control over doctrine over the Russian Orthodox Church. So that means that's what a church does. A church engages. That, I mean, that's the heart. That's the lifeblood of a church is to engage, is to do religion. And so when I look through it, I go to her dad's church's website, and what do I find? An organizational chart where it's like her dad, two other people, and then Patriarch Kirill is on her dad's website as his boss.
Right.
Okay. And I'm like, so it really is coming through Patriarch Kirill. And then I look at it deeper, and it turns out there's all these shell entities. This Union of Orthodox Journalists America is actually a website that is on it's on an internet domain that's actually banned in Ukraine because people affiliated with that have helped Russia in the war and been arrested.
Right.
So the long and short of it is, this was an information, like a deception operation to try to attack Zelensky, claiming that a law, by misrepresenting a law to the American people. And the Orthodox Church, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, is part of the Russian Orthodox Church. They maintain control over that, okay? Mm-hmm. They've been caught, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, many times, hiding weapons in the occupied territories. They collude with and say, yes, we will collude with you. We'll be a part of you. We're glad the Russians invaded. And when you see a website, just use your common sense. When you see a website that is promoting Catherine Whiteford, that is promoting Anna Paulina Luna's movement in D.C., and that's all they talk about, and the rest of what they talk about is attacking Zelensky. If you're a journalist inside Ukraine, are you going to spend, and you're spending 99% of your time attacking Zelensky and not Russia? Come on. So it turned out this website that was reporting on her and posting on social media in this lobbying movement was actually owned and started by her husband. Okay.
Okay.
And he never disclosed that. And the entity that she was a part of, her husband created the LLC for that. And then the entity that controls this newspaper, this newspaper, this Twitter account, is owned by her husband. Its ownership traces back to Cyprus, and the building that owns where they're at has a Russian flag out front.
Of course.
And there are there are sanctioned war criminals and sanctioned arms traffickers for Russia that share office space with this entity or in that building. So basically what I was able to show was that Anna Paulina Luna was in fact part of an information deception operation where they're using shell entities and lying and attacking Ukraine. And it was all a farce. I mean, it's ridiculous, and they were misrepresenting, committing massive violations of journalistic ethics. So I know that's a little bit of an in-depth explanation, but it's kind of like,
that's a good explanation. You gave us great details in there. I want to draw you back to Ukraine for a minute as part of that. A very short part of it is that I come from Texas, where every other corner is another First Baptist Church of John Street. If you go over to more, it's the First Baptist Church of Canal Street or whatever it is, right? Every time you turn around, there's a church. But we've had a decline in religious activity in America over the last 30 years, especially, right? But here, how Christian and religious are people here by default almost?
It's like Alabama plus.
Alabama plus, right?
But I mean, there's what I found is that if the level of people who are practice religion, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, or maybe something else. First of all, there's complete religious freedom. Nobody cares what religion you are. Nobody cares if you're transgender. They're just like, look, are you anti-Russian? Are you for the cause? Fine, great. We don't care. You can worship a head of lettuce. But they are have a very deep and abiding devotion to religion. It's how they help deal with the stress. I believe God is present in Ukraine. I've felt that many times. I described coming over the Polish border on the train. That's only one of many experiences I've had like that. And so when it comes to traditional values, when it comes to in churches that are like 1,000+ years old, and the focus on religion, I mean, it's very, very, very high level, more than anywhere I've ever been. But not,
well,
but also
my best
like
friend, Yeah.
they're not overbearing with it at all either. So
My best friend Andri, before the full scale, when we were driving around and learning about the country itself, and then also here in Kiev, we passed this building in Kiev, and he goes, "Oh, in this building, we used to practice our religion here because, well, like all the religions would be in this building." I was like, "All in one building? Wow." We couldn't wait to get religion, and that phrase stuck with me the last 4 years. We couldn't wait to get religion because it had been banned under the Soviet Union, and
right.
now there was a freedom to have religion. And then the second part of that is a couple of soldiers, including recently an American, and I'm going to address part of something with him. I'll put it on the table now about the aid necessary for Americans who served here. So put that in the board, everyone. Don't forget, everyone. I'll put you on task. So he said, when you survive the shit that we've seen, you become very religious. You become very spiritual at a level and he says, I was already maybe a little bit that, but I'm even more so now. And I feel this in soldiers and defender families that have gone through captivity and other hell. There's a deep, deep commitment to it. And I know some atheists here are agnostically, inclined people here, but no, the religious level is very important. And I think that's what undermines that whole argument about, Zelensky's cracking down on Christianity. No, no, no. This has got so much good Christianity going on in action, and I'm not someone who is in those categories. I'm a trained Buddhist who advocates for people's rights to be who they are. I totally respect Christians, Muslims, Jews, Jains, Hindus, etc. I'm not into the made up Scientology shit. All sorts of, made up shit. But here, the one category that you don't
I
see a
mean,
lot
that's
of,
kind of like an
yeah,
exploitation cult. So
yeah, exactly. The one group you don't see a lot of, but they're here, are evangelicals, but no one oppresses them.
right.
But in Russia, they are highly oppressed, and including Catholics. So it's Orthodox only, and Catholics can be screwed, but evangelicals screwed even more. Um, I got a lot of questions because I want us to get to Iran, but there's another big case that you were on recently that you posted a video of, and I had written about it on this platform when we were talking about the comm systems used for Shahed drones and actually all sorts of other different sanctions evasions that allow for weapons to be developed and harm to come to Ukrainians. And when I saw this video, I was one, proud of you, thank you. So in front of all of our friends, I'll say, Molodets, great job. You really took it fast. But walk us through this case you just recently presented up on in video form on your posts.
So yeah, so Ubiquiti is an American company, and the owner of that company is the owner of the NBA's Memphis Grizzlies. Okay, so he's one of
Right,
the
right.
youngest owners in the league, and Ubiquiti makes communications equipment, Wi-Fi extenders, and it is something that the Russians have used extensively. It is necessary to their ability to have conducted the invasion, to continue to have the occupation, and that's why you'll see them. They'll be climbing up these towers, and that's because they're trying to
Right.
put up a Ubiquiti Wi-Fi. It's Wi-Fi and other communications extension equipment. Now, I first learned about this, well, credit to Hunter Brook Media, OSINT Technical is another one that had really gone through and done a deep dive on on this network of sanctions invasion. Like Ukraine is not just like fighting this war against Russia, totally outnumbered. They're fighting North Korea, they're fighting China, but they're also fighting greedy ass Americans who are sending their equipment illegally through all kinds of channels in violation of sanctions, in violation of export controls. And so it's really critical and important that Hardbrick Media did this story and kind of laid out the groundwork of how their Ubiquiti is knowingly avoiding sanctions and export controls, how it's sold to Russia. And
Mhm.
this is something that they need to be held accountable for. Number one, to cut off the pipeline of this communications equipment, because we're in a really good spot right now with Starlink being cut off. They're on their heels. We need to make sure that the other aspect of communications, which is Ubiquiti, is also that they don't have access to at least replacement parts and cut off that pipeline. So after seeing this article, I took it on myself to look. We got to make sure we have accountability. Let's cut off this flow of parts and equipment. So one of the distributors, the main one in the United States, in that article was Multi-Link Solutions, in Ohio, Cincinnati. And I was on my way to Washington for a fundraiser for Kyle Sweetser. He's a Democrat, very pro-Ukraine, by the way, running for Senate, U.S. Senate in Alabama. But on the way to D.C., I was like, let me stop in Cincinnati because what happened with Multilink Solutions is that they had been contacted by an undercover journalist pretending to be in Russia and asking, "Can you send this stuff to Russia?" And she's like, "Sure, we can do that." She sort of hung up the phone, and then she called back. She said, "Wait, well, I can't send it directly to Russia, but we can get around it." Now she knows the owner of Multilink Solutions knew that this was. She's talking to a person in Russia who wanted this export controlled banned equipment and still came up with a plan to get around it. And we have a $79,000, an $79,000 invoice of stuff and an email that confirms this. She's dead to rights and she's actually on tape too. So I said, okay, first thing, these damn people, they think maybe the Trump administration won't hold them accountable, won't prosecute them, but they damn well are going to have to see the faces of the people that they helped murder. Okay. And they're going to have to damn well look in my eyes and what I saw in Kyrgyzstan and the people I know and the war crimes I witnessed enabled by their bullshit and greed. Okay. So I was like, just so you know, like to bring the reality of what happens over there, to bring that home. So I was like, okay, so they have an office in Cincinnati, Ohio. I printed out color copies of Larissa, who is the goat, the lady with the goats who got killed and murdered in Kyrgyzstan by the human safari. Also, the 1-year-old little boy, rest his soul, who got hunted by a drone and killed. I took color photographs, gory, gross ones, and then also of a dead family. And I started off with, and I walk in there and I say, "Hey, I have a big order, but I just wanted to, I want to run some things by you real quick." And I just went and sat down and I said, and as a former trial lawyer, I was taking like 150 depositions. I know how to get people to talk to me. So I went and sat down. I'm like, "Hey, so I just want to show you something. Let me introduce you to my friend." And I had somebody behind me filming, but in business attire, so she wouldn't get thrown off by it. And I just pulled this out. I'm like, "Hey, this is my friend Larissa." And the first picture was a nice old lady face smiling, and she was murdered by a drone in Kyrgyzstan. Boom. This is what it looked like. Boom. This is Andre. This is the Alexei, the little kid who was killed. Boom. This is, and these three. And I'm like, these are the people who were killed by you selling equipment to the Russians. And then I just started talking to her and she just kind of totally incriminated herself. And I wanted to ask her I wanted to look her in the eye. I was like, "Do you know anything about the genocide in Ukraine? Do you know that they're murdering kids? I was in the Ukrainian armed forces and I'm still here and I'm here today. Look at me. This is what I saw. This is what happened. Tell me, was it worth it? I'm not going to let this go. All right. You're going to be held accountable for it." And so, and then I talked to her and she went back and talked to her husband because he was too much of a coward to come out and actually make me leave. And so finally, we've had and so my goal is both to look this person in the face and let them know what's happening and take the pain that I've seen and pour it out into her office, but also is to make sure to document trying to hold all the people at the Ubiquiti, the NBA that is not doing anything to discipline this individual.
That's right.
If you're a black NBA player and you get like a DUI, or if you cuss at the referee in a game, you get like a six-figure fine, right? $130,000. This guy's helping commit genocide and nothing's happening. So there's going to be a series of videos, and I've got the first one out of me going to confront this woman, but there's going to be other ones, and it's going to be my journey to hold them accountable and see what it's like and kind of uncover the things that are behind the scenes that are helping kill Ukrainians. So that's what this video series is going to be about. I've got a long form video on YouTube, and I'll probably be doing some articles on Substack about it. But
And
that's
friends,
really the process.
let me say this real quick, is that to our friends, we have 38 friends in here watching right now, and there will be people who see this later. Do you see why we're doing this? Do you guys see exactly why we're doing this? Because we know in person what the results are of these events. I know it not only from being in the South and in the East, but I live here in Kyiv, where I've stood in front of buildings that have been severed in half by rocket attacks launched by planes that need little bitty parts to get those bomb bay doors open, little bitty bearings, little bitty bolts. And they have some of those aircraft are grounded entirely. And I didn't know this until I also did the work. And a big shout out to my homies over at Inform Napalm. The hackers that are in the different Ukrainian Hacker Alliance, Cyber Alliance, they go. I recently was corrected that my Ukrainian friends don't like to be called hackers; they're digital specialists. because of the possible negative connotation. But they have exfiltrated evidence of invoices. They're evading these sanctions, and I'd be glad to give some of those to you if you don't already have even more to do. And it's amazing. I think the part that's most amazing is the littlest things are what keep those bomb bay doors from being used to kill more Ukrainians. And they know this, so they keep, going around the world, but especially wind up in America with someone who gets this invoice and says, okay, let me see what I can do. And then they wind up getting a call from a Ukrainian, or in this case from you, who say, you know, there's this invoice where they tried to get this little part that opens Bombay doors, and you were willing to, help it. You do know there's a sanctions going on with this, and that
Yep.
pressure is very important because the Congress is not doing it. The executive branch is too busy chasing down immigrants and bombing, around the world. So we know they're not doing it, which leaves it to you. So I want our friends, if you're not already following John's account, please do so. And make sure you're always boosting the work that he's doing. That's literally why I wrote to you and said, hey, you need to come on and talk. One, you're my
Yeah.
buddy. So big respect for that. But this is too important what you just did. And would you like to
And it's going to
also get
continue. Yeah,
yeah,
and we're going to continue. We're going to keep, tracing it down. I think, like in this day and age too, like we have sort of journalism, which is important to uncover the stories, to put the info out there, but then there has to be like an activism component of that. Partner with that to report it, to take that, like, and sit in front of an FBI agent to
mhm.
contact the person's commercial landlord and be like, hey, because most commercial leases,
Right, right.
like you got to get creative, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
most commercial leases have something in there that say, because I know because I've drafted a ton of them, is that if you're engaged in illegal behavior, then we can kick you out because we don't want a SWAT team like busting through the door and we have to pay for it.
Right.
If it's
Well,
stuff like that,
well,
and
tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about how your legal training empowers your ability to do this, but in a smart way, and what our friends can learn from that.
well, I think it's number one to know. I mean, about things like the commercial lease, to know about the business licensing, to know about all the things that are actually put at risk by this kind of behavior. So you can go and also where to report it. And I've put that up on Twitter. We'll do it again. There's a specific form, a specific government entity that handles violations of export controls. We've got an
Mhm.
online form, and like you read the Ubiquiti article, and it's amazing and all that, but uh, how often does that get transmitted into like 50 people? Boom, 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 boom,
Right, right,
and creating a paper trail so that if the Trump administration doesn't pursue it, you can show that they didn't pursue it later. And also, but that there's state regulation, there's federal regulation, there's their damn lease. That, by the way, maybe their neighbors should know. Okay, maybe their neighbors
right.
should know who they're next to. I want to know. Okay, and it's not like you're not going to just be able to live a normal life totally devoid of any discomfort. And what I mean is all this is all legal stuff I'm saying, but but it's also telling your neighbor something that's not defamatory because it's actually true and it's factual. They should know that. You should have
Right.
at least the approach, the disdain of your community if you're doing this stuff. Okay,
Sure.
because I know, like, if those neighbors had seen what I've seen.
A real good friend of mine named Chris Sampson actually sent out letters warning about a child predator who was being a little too active on a local board, whose name was all the way at the New York Times, no less, for his sexual crimes, and yet
Well, and the other
his
thing that makes
wife
me
was
mad
on a
too,
board
man,
but
is
never
that
got a letter about it.
this this individual, this bitch, they live in like a $970,000 house. They have pretty much a brand. I mean, like maybe a 1-year-old $80,000-ish BMW X5. Okay,
Hmm.
um, and I told her it's in the videos like that. It's on my YouTube channel, but it's on the long form that I did. But it said, listen, and her kid was sitting there, and so I was being respectful and all that. But he's an adult. I mean, he was like in his 20s, and he's just sitting there like, probably the first time in his life learning some values that his parents didn't teach him. But that's a whole other
Right,
story. But
right.
saying these families do not get to sleep peacefully at night like you do here in America. Okay,
Right. That's right.
and you have all this money. I'm like you don't have enough. Let me tell you another way that I did it. Sorry, because I don't want to be too. This gets me really angry and heated. So there's reporting them to the federal government for violating export regulations. That's the main way to get them in trouble. Another way is to say, hey, landlord, did you know this person's helping commit,
That's
helping
right.
violate these laws? That's another way. The third way is under the Export Control Act, which is the federal law that governs this stuff, um, if you have any kind of notice or knowledge, or you're put on notice that somebody selling you or distributing your equipment is violating the Export Control Act, it's a strict liability statute. You have to cut their ass off. Otherwise, you become liable, and it's a 20-year prison sentence and up to $1 million fine per violation, per bolt, per part, per fucking wireless extender, every single one, 20, 20, 20,
Right.
million. So I went through the website, and I put this in that YouTube video. I was like, every single product they sell on their website. I went to
Right.
TP-Link, Motorola, blah, 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 blah. They all have an ethics hotline, or it's I could like a control officer, somebody who deals with regulatory issues, and or an ethics website or hotline. But it's all easy to find. You go there, and um, and I'm like, okay, and they have a place where you can email this stuff and report it. Good, go ahead and report it. If you want it, look, I didn't make this business make the stupid ass choice that they're going to try to make a few extra dollars helping genocide in violation of the law, and therefore put the rest of their business at risk. They did that. Okay. And I'm just going to pass along this article. I'm going to pass along this information. Do with it what you will. So that's all of the different angles and ways you can go at it, and be creative, be intentional, but be aggressive about it, because like lives are at stake. And every single wireless extender they cannot get is another life saved. It's another child that's not going to live under occupation.
Well, and as a person with legal experience, you might appreciate how I approach this. I had someone who knows one of my counterterrorism methods is to apply pressure where pressure is necessary for pain to stop. And when law enforcement isn't going to do anything, there's still, like you said, a lot of other options. And a particular person who was making threats online, who would have evaded legal, like he was not going to be locked up for it, but definitely had some moral compass problems, wanting to run over protesters, threatening Robert De Niro, literally just several lines beyond edgelording. He was the vice president for Sony Electronics USA sales. Well, that's something of value. Um, so the human resources department, the CEO, the CFO, and others got a very comprehensive dossier on his activities online, proof positive it was him, and all based in a public post. It was not doxing because I have all of his information, but the personal information was omitted, just enough to prove to those people who would know this is your guy, he works for you, he does the following, and this is what he does every day. By the way, how did we know he worked for you? Well, because of this post on his account, this post of him mowing his lawn, which is that address, this post of his wife, this post, and stuff he had forgotten 2 or 3 years before he decided to be Mr. Edgelord, threatening people to run people over and shoot Robert De Niro and wanting second civil war. And he had to go work at the local bank eventually because Sony USA decided, well, we don't really want to associate with this guy.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
look, you just
and I
hold
would do it all
people.
over again.
Hell, you got to hold people accountable for their actions, and that's exactly like it. It's like we're gonna dig, um, w- we're committed to this
Don't
cause,
want none, won't be none.
right? Exactly. So hey, people, there's just like the consequences of their actions. Look, I'm just like the implement I'm just like the vehicle, the gears of like consequence in life turning, but you put all the machinery into it. So
That's
yeah,
right.
and also, I think like it's really important. I've always like tried to. I mean, even the other night I go out to eat, and I go to this barbecue place right before it closes, and this girl asked me, "Hey, you're always seem really busy. You're here like right before it closes. Like, what do you do? What do you work on?" I'm like, "Oh, in 5-10 minutes, it's like now she knows everything about the war in Ukraine. Now she knows everything about Russian genocide, and I mean, it's just like
Right.
these things to teach people, both those who are doing bad stuff, that there are consequences and there are people who are committed, and we're not going
Mhm.
anywhere, and but also just like even in your everyday communications, is that to know, because coming from having lived in Atlanta and under the shadow of Martin Luther King, that's where he's from, and he
Right.
resonates deeply there. Is that the interconnectedness of humanity, and that's like the place really like where we should try to push and evolve towards, is where we see the interconnectedness of everybody, regardless of geographical boundaries are artificial. They exist on a map. You don't see it when you drive around, right? Um, and understanding that like what happens over there, what affects one affects everybody. in reality, in the ultimate, in like the universe and stuff. So I think that's something I try to live by, and this is all part of that.
Um, I want to pivot to this thing that's evolved in America, two parts of it. The attack on, I don't want to just lock into ICE in Minneapolis. I want to talk about essentially the attack on our sensibilities because, like on Friday, I'm gonna bring on Mark Zaid talk about the rule of law and how we've gotten so out of whack. So pretty much I want to start with that for a moment. And then, of course, now we have Venezuela and Iran being attacked by the Mr. No Wars guy. But first, in this area of how the law has been so destroyed under the DOJ, how the courts are responding, including all, circuit level, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And how do you feel about that situation? And what would you like to tell our viewers and those who are paying attention, what you think about it as someone who's practiced law, how dangerous it is, but also any silver linings.
You know, the courts are holding, thank God. And what you have with the Trump administration is by far the most lawless and corrupt uh, administration in any democracy in any country in history by far. Okay. These are things, this is like Robert Mugabe plus Muammar Gaddafi type stuff. The levels of
Yeah.
buying access to the government, buying pardons, that there is two completely separate. I think it's the thing that really stands out to me, and it's kind of brought into light even more by the Epstein files and what that shows us is there's two realities in America. Okay, there are the people with Trump and they get laws passed like this big beautiful bill, which is the biggest theft from transfer wealth from the middle class and the poor to the rich in the history of America, well, probably in the history of any democracy
That's
in the
right.
world, in like the history of mankind. And you also have this thing where if you have the money and you know the people, you can buy pardons, you can buy access. You have and it's like people like getting out of SEC investigations for crypto. They've
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
completely shut down any white collar criminal investigations on anything or any kind of white collar enforcement. So it is literally
Yeah.
people
The
just
idea that any of that's victimless crime always offends me because, people don't understand how many victims are screwed from those guys.
they are like, look at Polymarket. There was an $80,000 bet placed like 37 minutes before the invasion of Iran went live, and somebody made $1.2 million. So they're using classified information to gamble on soldiers' lives, and that's just one little piece of it. But I mean, I think like kind of overall broad picture, if white collar criminals who have contact with the Trump administration are doing whatever they want and they're stealing, and we're in this pivotal moment in history where you have artificial intelligence, the rise of social media, and these people, these tech bros, and those connected with the Trump administration that can basically buy elections, have complete access, and have no rules governing their behavior. And we're going to go past a point in time where we can pull that back without extreme pain and suffering. And this is a moment to really fight. This is a moment to make your voice heard and to make government work for the people again, and to make these corporations work for the people.
Hmm.
There's, by the way, there's no legal right to actually. It's a privilege to run a business, to have open an LLC. It's not a right. And like, if you look at what Teddy Roosevelt's State of the Union speech, I forget the exact year, but he talked about, yeah, we value business, we value innovation, but it has to exist within a legal framework. It has to exist, not at the expense of the people. And this control is slipping away, and people talk about, oh, we'll go back to, we'll get a Democratic president there and we'll go back to where it was. And it's like, there's no going back. Okay. We have to create a new. I think the silver lining is that this is a place in turmoil. And this is another Martin Luther King really, founding principle is that in the creative turmoil is where you can find strength in a new daylight, a new daybreak of freedom. And we're in a moment where people can finally, like, they're tuned in politically and they believe in things. And it's not going to be okay to go back to the old way. It's not okay to say, the Democrats, let's just do the minimum necessary to change and make things more democratic and about actual
Right.
meritocracy. Um, just enough to get the Democrats elected. Okay, I want them to get elected because I want to put a stop to this and hold Trump accountable, but that's not enough. Our imagination needs to be defined by what we can be as a people, not what will just benefit politicians to get elected again. So I think people are tuned in and they're seeing that in their community. And we see how the people, I mean, who knew that it would be, the old hippies in Minneapolis who would stand up first, not the law firms or anybody else.
Right.
So, and I think that's what we see. There's a sense of community, there's a sense of connection, and I think it's important. Another thing, just kind of silver lining thing too, is that when you look at Ukraine, okay, like, but most people didn't really, they had heard of it before the war, but they really
Right.
didn't know much about it. They didn't know it was the biggest democracy in Europe, the biggest country in Europe. They didn't know that it has this rich 1500, 1600 year history, or that it was under Philip Orlik was the first nation to pass a constitution with the separation of powers. It's like 50 years before us, 1718, I believe.
Or that the
And
Kazakhs
yeah,
actually had democracy.
right. And then you see like how far it's come to be a leader in the world, to where when there's a crisis in the Middle East, now they come to Ukraine. They want to come to Ukraine to get the weapons that Ukraine invented, that Ukraine developed, that Ukraine built on their own ingenuity, because these billion dollars rich oil, Gulf states, they have no ingenuity or innovation of their own, and they're coming to Ukraine. And that just shows like kind of the full circle leadership role that it's had in the world. And I think we can look to them. We can see how their democracy works, how well they respond. 7 days they complain, laws get changed. And Ukraine is itself a silver lining, but it's also for a democracy. Like, we need to believe in ourselves and build a new, in this turmoil, we're going to create something even better. So that's
And
positive.
I'll point out this for our viewers, and as part of this very important lesson learned, is that Ukraine has been assaulted over and over again as a corrupt country, as an excuse not to help Ukrainians because, corruption. When in fact the numbers from, and I started from 2000, you can go before that and it's still true, but especially from 2000 to now, so that's 26 years, have increasingly shown nothing but an upward progress in what is called the Transparency Corruption Index, which is how investors, big, supersized capital investors, the kind that invest in countries, resources and reconstruction, for instance. And from Sudan all the way up to Norway, they look at all these countries and they grade different problems. And Ukraine is always on the uptick. However, Hungary is going down, Slovakia is going down, and the United States is at a steeper decline than those. So that's really one.
There's something important that I want. So I just wanted to pull up this Martin Luther King speech because,
Yeah, go for it.
I look at his stuff now and I'm like, he could be talking about today. So this is his Beyond Vietnam speech, and it was probably his most revolutionary one.
Straight, yeah.
And he's actually, there's a part of it where he's talking about our military interference in Venezuela, which was happening back then too. Interesting, but he says, and this applies now. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. But the key thing, and that's JFK, says, I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of a world revolution, we must, as a nation, undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin, and tell me this doesn't apply to like where tech is going, where social media, where AI is going. We as a nation must we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. So it's crazy how timeless that is,
Wow. Especially like the other day when the announcement of AI company that I actually
Anthropic,
paid for, Anthropic. It was threatened, violently threatened by the supporters, no less, for holding to a very specific ethical line that was actually perfectly fine, not to be able to monitor or be used as surveillance on domestic, Americans.
The Skynet rule, the no Skynet rule,
the Skynet rule.
The people criticizing it are like, I'm pro Terminator. What the fuck?
Yeah, and automated weapon systems, which are still in need for work. And if you ever use these tools, and I use them all the time to do analysis, and I have a lot of prompting, work I did on it last summer in order to get ready to use it. So I didn't use it until I had found its errors, and I had really picked through where it made mistakes. so I could prove to make sure if I gave it like 5 PDFs of reports and it could fuse them into something more coherent that I would need, it would take me weeks and weeks and weeks to do. The Pentagon and other, parts of the intelligence apparatus are already using Anthropic. And all they did was say there's just two particular types of limits we're not going to change. And then we ape shit, and out comes uh, Sam Altman goes, "No problem, we'll do it." To paraphrase him.
Yeah,
So Dr.
immediately.
King's words are so prescient.
Yeah, they are, and it's like the very next paragraph. Sorry, it was the last thing I'll quote is that these are
Oh, please,
revolutionary
please
times.
continue.
These are revolutionary times all across the globe, all over the globe. Men are revolting against old systems of exploitation and expression, and out of the wounds of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the land are rising up as never before. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. We in the West must support this. So, I mean, like,
Mhm.
um, and also like people, if you want to see a movie that is like where we're headed, watch Elysium. It is created by
Mm.
the guy who did District 9 is the guy that wrote that.
Mhm.
And Elysium is like this future society where there's like a tiny little like 1% and they live, up in space while
Mhm.
down on Earth people it's the world's like destroyed and dystopian but that's exactly where we're headed and we have to hold on now um and then like when you talk about it's not just the corruption inside America or they're doing mass surveillance now of people, they're doing administrative warrants. I mean, they're breaking down the very fundamentals of the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, the relationship of people to their government and
Right.
the right to have privacy in their person's effects and papers. um you know you see that they're putting they call it like there's a guy, Ken Klippenstein, that gets a lot of good leaks from DHS, and he's got a good Substack, and he's on Twitter, um, where DHS is putting people if you go to a protest and you're peaceful, you're still getting put into a terrorism watch list, a terrorism database. And if you know anything about like the 1970s, the Church Commission, about how they
Mhm.
were just doing like basically warrantless surveillance and the way that they
Mhm.
are leveraging technology to
Yeah,
look into people's lives.
no knock, and COINTELPRO and all those eras. Yeah.
Right. Sending Martin Luther King letters from anonymous people saying you should commit suicide. Um, that actually came from the FBI. And so I just that is happening again, but it's way worse and more dangerous because of technology. And you have this rogue agency. Listen, we want to talk about we're like in this war with Iran. The ICE DHS with a budget each year that is bigger than the Israeli military, and the Israeli military has a substantial nuclear weapons arsenal,
Right.
is uh, going completely rogue. They had a whistleblower testify before Congress a week ago who's like, they're not even doing training on the use of force. They're not doing training on the Fourth Amendment. They have this, and I know from like my criminology background, way back, many years ago, is that when you see an organization like the LAPD under Daryl Gates or something like that, y- um, and they have also these tools, and they're violating the law. They don't care about warrants. That's super dangerous, and that's the times we're in. The other thing
M,
too
M,
is
M
yeah,
Hope asked whose Substack you were referring to.
Ken Klippenstein.
Oh, Ken Clippens said, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Ken's great. Yeah.
yeah, and so but the other thing I want people to understand too is like this is really critical is the rogue we are a rogue nation in international diplomacy. Okay,
Right.
let's explain what's happening in Venezuela. And I wrote an article. Um, I'm very sensitive about the improper use of military force because of what I witnessed the Russians do. All right. And
Okay.
also just like on a kind of maybe a more less important level, just as a soldier and the desire, like when you're a soldier, be a professional. And when you look at the Caribbean boat strikes, I wrote on my Substack, "Are we the terrorists now?" And I went through and analyzed the U.S. terrorism statute, 18 U.S.C. 2331, and kind of compared, are we using unlawful force for coercive political ends? And I basically concluded that, first of all, we're killing people in those boats. The reason we're blowing them up, the fact that they're allegedly committing drug transportation crimes,
Mm-hmm.
is the very same fact that cloaks them with due process that says you cannot do extrajudicial punishment. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we're giving this inequality we talked about, where like Epstein, he's rich, he gets away with stuff, or like these people who can buy pardons, or the tech bros can do whatever they want. It even exists at the level of our enforcement of criminal laws, meaning Rich El Chapo gets a trial. Rich El Chapo gets a due process. The poor guy in a country like Venezuela with 80% poverty, just making $400 in a month, doesn't get that. He gets extrajudicially murdered. Okay, it's mass murder, and because he's a civilian, he hasn't engaged in military force. He's not threatening us with military force. Anyways, so you see that, and that was kind of the start of it. We designated the Venezuelan government, Cartel de Solis, as a terrorist organization. We did a formal designation of FTC, FTO, foreign terrorist organization, in November 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we dealing with right now in Venezuela? Who is Donald Trump saying is doing a good job? Delcy Rodriguez, a terrorist, according to us, our own designation. And then when we take the $400 or $500 million of oil money, and then we send it to a Qatari bank account.
That's right.
Well, guess what? We're kicking back a lot of that to terrorists, according to our own designation, the government that we just designated. And so we're money laundering for terrorists. And on top of that, there are American businesses that have, court judgments against the Venezuelan government for when they nationalize their oil companies. They have the right to do that, but they have to provide compensation. They have court judgments, and instead of those people getting paid first, the ones who decided to follow the law and actually get a judgment are getting screwed, and the terrorists are getting paid first. That's a fraudulent transfer. So
that's right.
That's what's going on in Venezuela and how bad it truly is, and we kind of understand it in the legal framework. And then you look at Cuba. Okay, I hate the Cuban regime. However, when we use our Navy to do an oil blockade, that is actually considered a use of military force. It's illegal. And so what you're seeing, and also now with Trump, he kind of kicked over a hornet's nest in Iran, and this is like literally replacing bad dictators with even worse dictators, so that we can take money out. It's like colonialism on meth. Okay, it's insane. Right. So that's who we are.
And one of our viewers said something I think is even very important to part of this. Said Andreas says, so shocking how these boat strikes get drowned out, drowned into a ton of other events. Feels like ages ago.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And this is. And
the
flood also
the flood the zone, what I call cognitive warfare. The flood the zone with so much shit going on at once, you can't grab the high-speed baseballs flying at you.
And also like making a violence pornography and the desensitizing of people, getting them used to that violence. And also understand, you got to kind of just really pay attention and see these connections. And is that when they call those people terrorists and then they extrajudicially murder them, who else do they call terrorists? Well, look at NSPM-7. It's just this government document that says, basically, these people are going to be put into terrorism watch lists. And what is NSPM-7? What does it take to get put into a terrorism database? Well, I already talked about it. You can go to an ICE protest and be peaceful. That'll get you put in. But you also get put in the list of things is so vague and outrageous. If you have non-traditional values with respect to family planning, if you have non-traditional values with respect to Christianity, blah, 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 they'll put you in. Then you become, they put the same descriptive language on you that they put on the person they extrajudicially murdered. Something to think about.
And the other thing is, Tony said here that mentioned Tulsi Gabbard, and since with Atlanta, the fact that the head of intelligence, the DNI, was in Georgia fucking with the ballots. We have midterms this year, and we see obviously a strong attempt to manipulate. Not even the word manipulate seems so friendly compared to what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
But seeing that they're aggressively attacking our democracy at the breaking the ballot box with a fucking hammer level in front of everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you one thing for the viewers. I mean, I've told you this, but when I was younger, I was kidnapped by my father and forced to live under apartheid in South Africa. I lived under apartheid for several years and remember all of it. And I'm going to tell you that the mass.
Well, my founding activism was anti-apartheid.
Awesome. My brother's one of my brothers was they tried to draft him and he's like, fuck you, I'll go to prison. And he went to prison as a conscientious objector. So but my father was a bad dude, obviously he kidnapped me, but my brothers, myself, were all always fighting against that. But the echoes of my memories that I see when I see those agents driving around in their vehicles with masks on and just jumping out and beating the shit out of people, and then I saw that in under apartheid South Africa. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
real, and it happens. And it also, like, when I was in Izium, what you remember, like the blue camouflage, the police that took over the Donetsk police station, the Russian
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they wore like this blue camouflage, and
Right.
I remember finding one of their tactical vests, and I remember
Okay.
like kind of researching it, and I got a picture of it, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know, it's just like kind of a reflective moment, and like same stuff is
Well,
happening
that's a
here.
very good point because, for instance, just for our viewers who might not know this, in Izum and in Balaklia, which is a little town north of there, halfway between Izum towards when you're heading back towards Kharkiv, these centers were exploited as torture chambers, but also I asked several Ukrainian officials in you know local leadership, I guess. I mean, they're officials, but I'm trying to think of how they explain to our viewers their placement. Do you think that these were used because of the austerity, or not the austerity, the view that this makes us the new authority, right? If it's held here, it makes it more of an authority location. It's the police station. It's the local oblast, um, administration building. And you mentioned like what the uniforms were, and this what I think for our viewers shows more of a standard operating procedure playbook. It's not ad hoc. These guys were not, oh look, there's a building, we'll go do this over here. It was clearly planned way out, well in advance, and above them. So
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
and I tell you, like, it's happening on many different levels, okay? And the fact is, we also have at the same time this destruction of traditional legacy media, which, by the way, screw them, because Trump, in part, is because they put him on so much and gave him so much
Right.
free. I mean, like when he was running in 2016, they're like, this guy was a dangerous clown, but he's great for ratings. And I will tell you, like, the more we go through history and time, I'm like, the more that I think I started like, who's at fault? If I was well, Trump, obviously, to some degree, but there's also like the Republicans who enabled him. But then, like, my percentage of fault for the media keeps growing, over time, and you know, and we see like independent journalism, the stuff like us talking today, people, writing on Substack, the stuff that you do. I mean, the stuff that I try to do, and it's like the focus needs to be on that because look, we don't care. Like nobody's going to fire me, and if they were, so what? I'm too stubborn. I don't know any better. So, but like
I've
destroying
been
like
running my own business 27 years after walking out of corporate America, being a successful manager for other people's money.
yeah,
And they would fuck people out. And I would say I did fine. They would fuck people out underneath me.
yeah,
So I would make promises to my team for, if you do this, we're going to be successful. They would do everything I asked. I would go to bat for them. And literally I go, well, you can't screw over my guys and people above me. He's like, whose guys? Yeah, your guys. And they didn't understand this like chain of command that really works. If I have no ability to take care of the people who work in my team because someone above says, no, 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 those are not your guys. Those are my guys. And if I don't want to pay them a bonus, what are you going to say about it? And all I was trying to tell him was, well, they won't work as well for you.
right,
And I quit. And the reason why I stay as an independent journalist now is that no one's going to tell me we can't cover something to the nth degree until we exhaust the fuck out of it. We're not going to say you can tell the whole story, but it's got to be in 800 words.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and like, and also like I see like there's this bubble where these people exploit like an information space, but they keep it so that they're insulated from actual tough questions, from actual good debate, from actual people who know
right,
what the
right,
hell they're talking about. Like it's like the Scott Jennings of the world who are not really put in front of someone like me. He's gonna try to talk about war, talk about Ukraine. Okay, listen, I was standing in Kherson. Went to go. I moved 100 feet, and the people I was standing next to were. I came back, and there was body
right,
parts.
right.
Okay, all
That's
right.
right.
How many cruise missiles have you seen slam into a hospital, Scott? Like
Right.
so they do that, and but we're making this our own and anew, and that's they're at all levels they're attacking stuff, and I'm also like just trying to make people aware of things. Well, the ways that they might attack the voting systems. An article I'm working on is number one, like they did in Atlanta, they're exploiting the what I call a legal glitch in the search warrant process. When you apply for a search warrant, it's like a grand jury. It's one-sided evidence, one-sided testimony. There's nobody there when there's a search warrant being presented to tell the judge from the person to be searched, the defendant, hey, this is a lie. These theories have all been debunked in lawsuits. He's just seeing that. He signs a search warrant. And then by the time the judge learns that they lied in the search warrant application,
Right.
it's like weeks
Right.
later. And if he does that at a few precincts here and there, then that's enough to that can be one way. The other thing that they're doing is trying to pass this executive order. Well, the other way is that, this ridiculous executive order, which would make every person in America re-register to vote. That's 240 million people.
Right.
The third way that they're going to do it is they're trying to, this Save America Act, which is going to require every married woman in America to go get a new passport. Who controls the passport office?
Right.
Trump. So,
Right.
and there's things that people are like, I don't really don't see. And there's, little areas of things that we can kind of point out that I think are important. But at every level, from foreign policy, we're a rogue nation. I mean, we're threatening to attack Greenland, and what we're doing in Venezuela, what we're doing with Iran now. Internally, they're looking at us. They're engaging in a level of illegal surveillance and violation of the Fourth Amendment we've never seen in our history. The way that they're building like a little Gulag archipelago throughout the entire country.
Yeah.
And
we bitched about Gitmo and all those things we had 20 years ago.
When you see the floor plan of some of these places, and I also my undergrad is in criminology, and I did a lot of work with that in prison reform earlier in my career. And it's
wow.
When you see, I know all the requirements for a prison to comply with the Eighth Amendment, and and you see the floor plan for some of these facilities, gulags that they're building for people who haven't been convicted of a crime most of the time, by the way, and kids and women. It literally, I was on a stream, and I try to do a stream from 3 p.m. Mountain Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 days a week on Twitter, and I'll be expanding that more and getting that out more. But I'm like, look, people, compare this to the fucking Amistad, okay? The slave ship. Floor plan of a slave ship, floor plan of what they're building on America now. And they look almost identical, okay?
Right.
Because they're so close together, and I don't know. I just think at all these different levels. But
and how I mean, I ran a site years ago. I finally just let it expire because people weren't participating and getting involved. But prisonforprofit.org, talking about CCA and GeoTrust and the amount of money that they made. But not just that those money makers and there were obviously politicians who were banking at it, but that there's also a series of satellite businesses around those that make money off of families that get hooked into it. So my example was that in the mid 2000s, a family member who was detained for an argument with his girlfriend that gets a police report, and then it just starts unraveling. It's a TPS violation that he's dealing with, and all of a sudden he's picked up, and in order to contact him, I have to pay $50 to an organization that's so that I can make $5 calls until I run out, and then I have to pay it again. I'm like, but I haven't done anything. What the fuck are you taking $50 out of my pocket for? Why isn't there a process that? And that's how I got into the study of what this was. This unchecked power. And also for our viewers, it was shortly after that states like Mississippi, of all places, Mississippi, went back and audited how much the government would be charged versus how much CCA and GeoTrust would be charged. And it very clearly shows that when the states run things, you have better security and you save money. But how many politicians were on the dole now? How many politicians were getting money out of this, and their campaigns were being funded by this, and now they can profit directly from this? So it's even worse now. I mean, we're in 2026. This is 20 years since I first hit that case.
Yeah. And we have a literally a paralyzed, non-functional Congress because of the Republicans. I mean, they will not. They've gotten to a level of ridiculousness where you have Anna Paulina Luna on CNN last night saying that it's not an act of war to bomb a country and to kill its leadership. I mean, or where you have people like Mark Wayne Mullen, these people, they will never ever criticize Trump no matter what. And
that's right.
It's unbelievable. But they're kind of going down and making things worse for themselves over time. But it is still a level that we've never seen before. And then the situation with Iran right now, if you want to turn that, I gotta throw a charger on my phone real quick. So the screen's gonna move a tiny bit. Um,
It's all right. Yeah,
let me see here. There's a joke in here somewhere.
it's all right.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So
And I want to definitely say to our friends here, if you're not already following John's account here and elsewhere, make sure you're doing so because my next question, which is essentially I think the most important question I'll ask all night is, you want to do this again and again and again until we get through this hell?
yeah, for sure, for
Because
sure.
we
Well, me
communicate a
too.
lot about these items that are happening, and we like it's good to bring it to our friends here. They actually write offline about what they learned from these segments, and I
Cool.
think they need people who will do the work. And I'm gonna say I love that you have done parts of the work I don't have time to do. I know it gets done, and when I see you, like in the case of Ubiquiti, really going at the office level. I mean, I'm not in America; I'm over here. It's invaluable, and we need more of that.
Yeah, I think it's good to touch base. That's why like I do that stream, and so what I could do is like we can to like each Monday or just whenever we'll talk about it offline. But
Sure.
it's to like give people like a summary of like everything that's the things that have happened, what's important, what's maybe a little less, kind of just like mental organizational sort of like what's going on stuff. I think is helpful for people
Yeah.
because it's
Well, Sean Penn and I are doing the Friday report about what's happening here in Ukraine that only we may be able to quite pull off that way. It's not really being done that way. We have
yeah,
people who talk about Ukraine, and we really want to thank those people who do, but they don't live here. And like
right,
he's a soldier and he's British. I'm a journalist with counterterrorism background as a civilian, and an American, and we read the tea leaves being here, and they go, you know what happened in Ukraine today, and then you and I have some areas that are very interesting overlaps. I did know this thing about your background in South Africa, and you highlight what a police state does to the people by really bringing that forward. So I think
yeah.
we have a lot to learn from where you're at with that. Any thoughts you want to share with our friends before we go of what's happening with the where my question would be like this as a final thought for this. People are very stressed. I get messages all the time. What do we do? What do we do? What we do? What would you say to that kind of general pleading to give focus to it?
Well, so I think that just follow us, and we're working on planning behind the scenes to make sure that we're organized so that we get the Democrat. I mean, for me at least, but like I'm keeping track of all the people who've engaged in corruption, all the subpoenas that need to be sent, all the things that are happening. Like I'm keeping organized in that. But there's going to be a way very soon to incorporate people to sort of like work on some of these things with me, with us, and be a part of it, and really kind of develop a grassroots movement. I hate that word, but you know what I mean. It's like
No,
like one of my ex girlfriends would be like, "You're not present with me," and I'm like, "Oh, president," but like we're keeping track of this. We are being structural and methodical about it, and we're in this for the reasons of like it's not about the followers, it's not about money. It's really about supporting to make sure Ukraine wins. We get Democrats in office so we can do the investigation, and also listen. Democrats have issues. It's not necessarily about politics, but like they're the only ones that are like not crazy right now, and they're more for. And I will say this for because I used to be a more like a Republican conservative, a McCain Republican, if you will. But
hmm
I always wonder like who really who's more altruistic, who really actually believes the stuff they say. And it's clearly, having been both, it's clearly the Democrats and the liberals. But we're being organized. We're working on ways that we can be methodically attack these things and feel like people are able to participate. So just stay tuned. Those plans will be out publicly soon. But even like little things,
Yeah.
like when I put up the form where you can report Ubiquiti, where you can report multi-link solutions to the government organization, I'll put that on Twitter. Like little things like that. I mean, like 3 minutes of your day when we make a request like that can mean the world.
Well, and I'm going to spare everyone the long form. I have a very long form answer to this, which is basically to my dear friends, it's your fault. It's the thing that no one says. Like I'm talking to a friend of mine earlier. I said, you ever have that musician that said, Man, this crowd sucks. It just leaves the stage even though everyone bought a ticket because they literally don't see the response coming from the audience. And I had musicians who would tell me about lame audiences. And and what I wanted to do with it was say, how did we get the news that we have? We can only blame the algorithm and the tech bros and the owners of news so much because here's the reality. If it was profitable, they'd stick with it. If people are heuristically digesting and grazing little bits and then calling themselves full, then they're actually also part of the problem. So instead of pointing fingers and making people feel bad, I think it's more important to say, you guys who are here, our friends who are here watching this right now, you are trying to do, I can see it, you're trying to do the part that gets the best information, quality information, and is bypassing the corporate media that's obviously sold itself out, Jeff Bezos being the worst example, or CBS doing the same
Very
thing.
wise.
Very wise, right. So, but here we can really work on getting an organic network. Like on Rick the Ukrainian stream last night, young Crimean activist, she and I spent all day talking about options to really basically create a Crimean voice in this community that doesn't get heard. And we can do that, and we can do it with low tech tools, high tech tools, but a low tech budget. And I think that that's what we have to do. And it's our audience that's going to make it happen. You and I can scream in the void all day long. And if no one's seeing it because none of our friends boost it, because none of our friends take the time to say, hey, look, I'm not having to create the items. I just got to let other people know that it happened. I'm not the one who has to go write all those words. I just need to take the time to read them.
Yep.
And that's part of what you were saying.
100%.
Brother man, go do
All right,
your
man.
stream. I appreciate you tons. And we'll see you
Yeah,
back
thanks for
here as
setting
soon
this
as
up. We'll
possible.
do it. We'll do it more. And thanks to all the people. And we'll build a great community. Appreciate you guys. Have a good
I
day.
appreciate you. Slava Ukraini.
Herom Slava.
See you soon.
All right, wait.
All right. So to our friends, I'm gonna rattle for a few more minutes as we say goodbye. We have this week, Decoding Fox News will be on Wednesday. I have Phil Air is planning to join with me on Thursday, and I'm gonna lean up a little bit now that we have more of the screen. And then on Friday we have Sean Penner, and then the incredible super lawyer himself, Mark Zaid, will join us. And there'll probably be some things in between. The good news is behind the scenes, I have some really great options. It's just timing. It's still timing. So some very busy people like Fred Wellman, Rick Wilson. There's a few friends that are glad to do it. We're just trying to coordinate our timing, and it's always, of course, someone's traveling or like working on a book or something that has to do this. And I'm very glad to be on this platform. And Rick the Ukrainian, my dear friend, who was asking last night to me and Sean, why do we like Substack? It's it's a tool system that, for instance, when John and I finish our conversation, John has the video as well. John can go do his posting. I can go do my posting. When Sean Penner's on, same thing. I get the content. He gets the content. Both of us can propagate it. But we need you to be able to do that with us. So I want to thank those that have taken us from being an 18 follower account on Substack just a couple months ago to now 617, and I have now number 24 on the list of growing. Fuck Michael Flynn and the traders. The good news is the growing list of news that's inclining is Michael Flynn's one of the only goons on there. But I used to point this out to our Twitter community. Especially the pro-Ukraine community, English-speaking pro-Ukraine community. Our adversaries have several hundred people in those chatter spaces. They fill up the chatter spaces with absolute junk. And we have to do better. I commit every day to a lot of writing. I literally scream at the computers. No one wants to be in the office with me when I'm working because, like, fucking computer, you hurry the fuck up. None of the computers are fast enough because I'm voracious at wanting to get this done. I'm often juggling 5 articles at once because I have impulses based on what you ask. based on what you see. And one I just put together tonight that I started a couple of days ago was when they started this attack was based on a comment I made years ago with threats towards Iran the first time. I have zero sympathy for the leadership in Iran. They can get help. But the people, I have a lot of Persian friends. And it's a real, actual nation. It's not a synthesized nation like in Libya, which had three areas, Fezzan and Tripoli, and like if you think of Libya, the north it has two divisions, and then the south Fezzan is a third, and it's fairly because of colonialism, it's fairly artificially constructed, and that makes dominating and destroying it doable. Persia, not so much. The way in which Persia has been manipulated has a lot more to do with corruption models and oil. And we'll bring on Craig Unger as soon as possible. We sort of alluded this in our last conversation that the Anglo-Persian Oil Company was founded by a guy named William Darby, who was a mining speculator out of. He had worked in Australia with the Morgan Mining Company before getting into other speculation, and almost went bankrupt. Was almost out of cash when he was going to Europe to ask for more money to keep speculating. When he just happened to get lucky that one of his speculations in Persia lit up, and he happened to have a corrupt prince who said, "I'll work with you," and voila, Anglo-Persian Oil Company came about. Then Iran said, "Well, we will nationalize all of this because it's best in our best interest that we control how they would be doing this." And a guy named Mossadegh was summarily overthrown and replaced with the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran remained in power until, of course, the Islamic Revolution. And now we see that the Islamic Revolution, still in charge, is in a tete, I guess, if you will, fight with the out of control drunk Pete Hegseth led Department of War. But let me warn Americans who don't understand this. This is not Iraq. Look at my article. Do the numbers. Feel free to fact check the hell out of it. I'm perfectly okay at it. This is the scientific method. If you find flaw in the article, give me a notification. I'm going to tell you right now, if you thought that the amount of casualties that happened in Iraq were bad and the amount of money trying to nation build in Iraq was bad, wait till you see the next bill. Because it's a whole different ball to deal with. And China will stand its ground, quietly watching the West flail around like a digital octopus, trying to control the propaganda sphere, try to do it in the physical level with airstrikes. But there's no chance that the United States will dedicate big armed forces to a ground invasion and get the police department dismissed and install Anwar not Anwar, what's his name, uh, al-Maliki, government in Iraq. All those things that happened in Iraq are not going to happen in this case. It's just not going to happen. The ground game was not laid out. The current administration has no game plan. We don't know where this goes. And then whereas Iran does not have all of the traditional, conventional warfare power that we would assume, that we would be fighting against. It has a lot of hybrid warfare tools. It has entire wings of cyber hackers, APT level, advanced persistent threat, and I'll explain that in a second. It has disinformation teams that are extremely active. And if you remember the false email that circulated around in 2020, claiming to be Proud Boys, better vote this or else. Well, those came from Iranian hackers, Iranian disinformation artists. And Iran has been playing off the board for a long time in a way America doesn't play. America, even under Trump, still plays some part of this battle by the rules. the rules of gravity, the rules of war, even beyond that. Whereas hybrid warfare is a whole different model that basically is what I call cat chess. And I love to teach about cat chess. What is cat chess? It's when someone said to me, what do we do? What do we do about like the fascists? And I go, huh? You ever play cat chess? No. Would you ever play chess with a cat? No. Why? Well, because cats don't know the rules. Okay, 4-year-old doesn't know the rules. If your kid came up and said, "I want to play chess," would you say, "Hell no, you're too stupid"? Well, no. So you would play without the rules if it's a child, then, right? Okay. And I begin to understand where I'm going with this. When you play against people who don't follow the fucking rules, you got to stop thinking about the rules in the same way that keep you bound. That's the whole purpose of trying to fight against reflexive control and cat chess. That's all. I can beat every fucking cat that ever wants to play chess with me. I probably can't beat grandmasters. I live in Ukraine. I don't even go at the park. I don't sit down with the old guys. I'm not. I'm pretty good against the average person at a bar party, but I'm not going to sit there with the grandmaster levels. But I understand a bit about this cat chess mentality because I've dealt with people who were stalkers. I used to track, neo-Nazi and ISIS accounts, and I just know that there are ways that which you have to reimagine the board. You have to play off the board. And I see very clearly that Iran, even compared to Russia, by the way, Iran plays way off the board. We know this, for instance, when it comes out of the mouth of drunk Captain Pete when he talked and he ran his excuse spin about and actually a few of the talking heads around Sunday platforms talking about what Iran has been doing that's killed so many Americans. They basically mentioned all of these. They mentioned them, but they didn't call it what it is, hybrid warfare. They didn't approach it that way, and they don't have statutes to do that. That's why they need to be one removed from office, through the available processes, and then checked at the office level by people who get it and people who are trying to make sure that America doesn't damage itself, its citizens, its resources, and our allies. And we will talk about this throughout the week. I have a few. I don't know. I don't have a planned guest for tomorrow, but I have some options that we may do. And if so, you'll see it one announced earlier in the day, and then I will pretty much launch at the same time at night, roughly 11 p.m. for my time, 4 p.m. for your time on the East Coast, 3 p.m. Central. Um, and I think that it's important, like I said, to understand when it comes to Iran, there are ways in which vulnerabilities are going to have to be shored up by the private class of people, the private industry. Your local government has to pay attention to things that the federal government is going to fail on. Uh, the vulnerabilities in the United States are innumerable. When I was writing a book about ISIS propaganda, it was actually called about the hackers, hacking ISIS. Um, hackers sucked, actually. All the CCA and all those that were, they were basically suck. They were skitties, as we call them, script kiddies. Um, but under the right kind of leadership, they could have been more dangerous. They could have had just enough power to make problems in America. And the reason why is a sort of naivety in America and a comfiness in America that is going to be checked on a regular basis. And that includes not only in the homeland itself, but also abroad. If you're a traveling person, be very careful. I'm going to repeat that. If you're a traveling person, be very careful. If you're a traveling person, head on swivel, be very careful. You are a target. If you are also talking to people online and if you are in certain types of institutions that could share information, not about government classification stuff, about systems. Maybe you work with, a communications company. Maybe you work with a banking, entity. You have to be careful about spearfishing. You have to be careful about, like, for instance, spearfishing going to the APT side. Most of the hacks that we know about under APTs from Russia, and especially the ones from Russia and China, Korea, and Iran, they start with someone who's not important. They look through all the CCs. Then from the copies there and the exfiltration, they can go and build essentially a profile of the organization. They can build a profile of vulnerabilities, and eventually they're going to get someone who makes the mistake. And next thing you know, the local hotel's entire schedule has been leaked, and they know who's coming and going. And they can sit in there for months and wait to see if an American official comes through there, or a journalist comes through there, or a law enforcement official comes through there. It's any numbers of ways we've already seen documented. And so to this phrasing before I go, what is APT? Advanced Persistent Threat. Advanced in the sense that it has maximum amount of funding and resources to do the job. Okay? It's not a couple people in a basement. It's not a couple, a few kids that have some really cool skills with the computer. It is a bureau, and it could be a private industry thing. It's not necessarily government. Number two, persistent. There's a shift at clock, another shift, the clock, another shift, the clock, so that it's perpetual. So that once the operation starts, it stays until it's completed. And thus, because of these conditions, it is indeed a threat. And I have a list. I may crack that list open later this week. I'm not going to do it tonight or tomorrow. I got some things to do tomorrow. But I have a whole list of all these. And I have a list of the Persians, or as the CrowdStrike people, when Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear and all of those. The Persians, are the kittens in the APT world for CrowdStrike. But in the case of other companies, they get all sorts of different names. And they're looking for vulnerabilities in things you wouldn't think are important first. They don't go right up to the Pentagon and say, "I'm gonna hack, John Miller, and John Miller is going to give me all the information to the entire industry." No, 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 no. That is not how that works. We know because the records are out there. The records are out there that show there's just one staffer somewhere who did not know how important that was, answered an email that looked familiar, passed it on, and they saw nothing. Their computer's already been infiltrated. There's a monitoring going on, and they're just waiting to see what other information goes in. And some of them on the other end are fruitless. Sometimes, the spear phishings hit a stone wall where nothing really yields, and they're doing a lot of them. There are several in Iran who have been developed to the nation state level and are part of the IGRC's weapon system. Why does this matter? Because Iraq didn't have this shit. Iraq did not have FPV drones. Iraq did not have drone swarms. It did not have these items. It did not have much of a foreign manipulation system for terrorist acts. Iran does. Not just Hezbollah, not just Hamas, not just the proxies that are in Yemen and others, but across the world, they have that apparatus already active and in place, all publicly documented. I don't do fucking conspiracy theories. I don't do invisible hand explanations. Invisible hand explanations means like that's how conspiracy theorists talk in order to get through. I'm not interested in that. So we're going to not do that. And that's really where I want you guys to start getting ready to understand what the complications will be. So I want to thank you for joining tonight. If you don't mind, follow the account or subscribe to this account. If you don't mind, become a paying member at $5. Add it up because there's some people here who actually flip the bill along with me to make sure the news isn't something I'm thinking about at the bill level. There's no profit in it at this point. It's just not having the stress of the bills. Like I live in this studio, so like half of this place over in the other room is where I go to sleep in a little bit. And then the other half has been wired to be where I work so as not to have to rent a place that costs more money to have to go do it. But also, it's the ability to make sure that when we travel, like next week, we're going to go to Kharkiv and do some research in person. You'll hear about that because I'm talking to the guy I'm going to go with. We're going to come back and talk to you about, so what does America do when a drone swarm comes flying at them? Because, well, we've gone over that here in country and in person. I'm committed to doing independent research, independent journalism with you guys till the end of my breath, whenever that is. God hates me, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. God's going to make me watch other people go through hell and keep me traumatized from it. So we're good to go that there's a lot of work going to happen. So thank you for those who have been doing that. We're at 41 subscribers that pay out of 617, 18 or something. And so the more we can do, we can get that. If we could basically get that base level up enough where operating expenses are not a problem, that's good. Next week, I have a $200 tab on one of the plugins I use for maps. That's on uamission.com, NatSec Media, one site that's offline called, I don't want to tell you what it's called, but it's basically the Trump the Trump team stuff we track, and we literally have maps in there, and we have plug-in tools that are used on those sites. That the yearly payment, and actually the good news is it's a yearly payment. Once the yearly payment's taken care of, I don't have to deal with it until next March. So it's not something that happens in April and again and again. Once that's done, it's good to go. The map payment was paid last week. It was used to be $49. It's a great map tool. If you go to uamission.com and you see these maps that are in there to see where weapons are made, which districts are voting for Ukraine, that map I could use on 5 sites was $50. It's now $59.99. It used to be $49.99. I think it's $59.99. It's paid, but they add up. The domains add up for a lot of these things, and we're just going to keep doing it. God bless. I own the server, but the server bill will be paid next week too on the 11th, and it's $300 a month. So my clients can only pay so much of that because a lot of the rest of it, over half of it, is elective work for all this stuff we do. Ukraine Pet Rescue, UA Mission, Heroes Dash Ukraine, Wagner Project. None of these things are commercial. None of these things are anything more than information portals where we can take it, think about it out loud. When I talk about state capture in Africa, uh, go to WagnerProject.org and you can see literally that mapping tool I showed you that shows you where parts are. And I like doing the homework right in front of you. So when people argue about the bills that come out of Congress in order to pay for Ukraine, all of that's in uamission.com. When it's the articles about the defenders, like we see in the platform earlier, that's on NatSec Media and heroes-ukraine.org. But how much profit is in it? None. I'm not here to make profit. I'm here to tell you what's happening on the ground in Ukraine, no matter what, to film directly for Ukrainians who are in need. I don't work with the government here. I don't take, deals that would, how do you want to put, like cooperative ventures with United 24, that's fine that United 24 exists. I'm not doing that. I have to keep it at this ground level with you guys. That means also, and this is the final part, and I think most important part, the more I hear from you what you want to know about, the more I hear from you what you saw, what you learned, what you want to know more about, which is why we like to read the chat space, the better we get at what we do. And I'm committed to adding one more tool in this as soon as possible. I have 2 options we're narrowing down to, is the ability to have you call, and also a way that you can call it protects your information, no numbers necessarily. Like Google Meet is one option. And you can call in and have a discussion with our guests, and we can, probably even, open up the time where we do our version of, the way radio does it. I did radio for many years at KPFT in Houston. We had switchboard that had 8 lines, and we had a person in the other room that was taking the calls and queuing up a system for us to see. So we're going to do the same thing. I think that's very important because I love to hear from you. And I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you to John Jackson for an incredible fucking report. Yes, I was blown away by a few bits of information I only knew a little bit about. So we will keep doing that. And again, join us. If not every day, I know we're going to be here on Wednesday with Decoding Fox News. And we will see you soon. So thank you so much. Good night. Slava Ukraini, Heroim Slava, I Pizdets Rossiyskої Federacji.